Understand what happened at Mutta, you have to understand what provoked it. Earlier in 629, Muhammad had sent an envoy named Al-Harith ibn Umir al-Azdi to the Ghassanid king Shirabil ibn Amr, ruler of a Byzantine client state along the Syrian frontier. Envoys were sacred. Every code of the Arabian Peninsula treated the killing of a messenger as an act of war. Shirabil executed Al-Harith on the road. That was the spark. The Prophet raised a force of 3,000 men, one of the largest expeditions Medina had ever assembled, and appointed 3 commanders in explicit succession. First, Zayd ibn Haritha, his freedman and adopted son. If Zayd fell, command passed to Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, his cousin and the elder brother of Ali. If Ja'far fell, command passed to Abdullah ibn Rawaha, the poet-warrior of the Ansar. The specificity is chilling. Muhammad was preparing his men for the possibility that all 3 would die. They marched north through the Hijaz, crossed into the Badiat al-Sham, and camped at Man in southern Jordan. There the scouts brought news that turned the expedition into something no one had planned for. The Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, fresh from his crushing victory over the Sassanid Persians at Nineveh 2 years earlier, had personally reinforced the frontier. Reports reached the Muslim camp of a coalition force numbered in the tens of thousands. Later Islamic chroniclers put the figure at 100,000 Byzantines plus 100,000 Arab auxiliaries. Modern historians revised this sharply downward. The realistic estimate is 10 to 15,000 Byzantine regulars supported by Ghassanid and other Christian Arab tribal levies. But even the conservative number is a 5-to-1 disadvantage against a professional imperial army. The Muslims held a council. Some argued for retreat, for sending word to Medina and requesting reinforcements. Abdullah ibn Rawaha stood up and made a speech that decided the campaign. He said, "By God, this thing we hate is the very thing we came out seeking, martyrdom. We do not fight the enemy with numbers or with strength. We fight with this religion. Go forward. Only one of 2 good things awaits, victory or paradise." The column marched. They chose their ground at the village of Mutta in the plain of Masharif, where a shallow wadi and a stand of low hills offered some protection to the flanks. And then the Byzantine army came into view. But that was only the arrival. What happened in the first hour of contact stripped the Muslim expedition of every man Muhammad had named to lead it. The battle opened conventionally. Zayd ibn Haritha, holding the white banner of the Prophet, formed his 3,000 into a defensive line and advanced to meet Theodore's front rank. He fought at the very tip of the wedge. Byzantine spears, the standard heavy infantry contus wielded by the frontier limitan, punched through the Muslim vanguard. Zayd was struck multiple times and went down still holding the banner aloft. He was the Prophet's freedman, the man Muhammad had raised as a son. He was the first to fall. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib caught the banner before it touched the ground. Ja'far was 33 years old, a cousin of the Prophet, a man who had led the first Muslim emigration to Abyssinia and returned only months earlier. He rode a chestnut mare into the Byzantine line. When his mount was hamstrung under him, he dismounted and continued on foot. According to Ibn Ishaq, who compiled his account from eyewitnesses within 2 generations of the battle, Ja'far took the banner in his right hand until his right hand was cut off. He took it in his left until his left was cut off. He clutched it to his chest with the stumps of both arms until a Byzantine cavalryman split him from shoulder to hip. When the Muslims recovered his body from the field, they counted more than 90 wounds on the front of his torso, not one on his back. The Prophet would later name him Ja'far al-Tayyar, Ja'far the Flyer, saying God had given him 2 wings in paradise to replace the arms he lost at Mutta. The banner passed to Abdullah ibn Rawaha. He hesitated. One narration says he paused with the banner in his hand, uncertain, and then recited a poem to steady himself. He charged and was killed almost immediately. 3 commanders, 1 battle, perhaps 90 minutes of fighting. If this is landing, save this video. You will want to come back to this one. The Muslim line began to buckle, and at that moment the succession Muhammad had dictated in Medina ran out. There was no 4th name. What happened next has been debated by military historians for 1,400 years. According to the majority of the sources, a warrior named Thabit ibn al-Arqam seized the falling banner, held it up, and shouted for the men to choose a commander. Voices called out different names. Thabit himself proposed Khalid ibn al-Walid. You need to understand who Khalid was at that moment. He was a recent convert. He had accepted Islam only months before the expedition. 5 years earlier, at the Battle of Uhud, he had commanded the Meccan cavalry that flanked the Muslims and turned a Muslim victory into a bloody defeat. He was the man who had nearly killed the Prophet. And now, with 3 commanders dead and the army on the edge of collapse, 3,000 men handed him the white banner. Khalid took it, and he made the decision that made him legendary. He did not countercharge. He did not seek martyrdom. He did something almost no 7th century Arab commander would have done. He chose to save the army. Here is what the history books often flatten into a single sentence. Khalid's decision was not simply to retreat. Retreat from contact with a heavy Byzantine army on open ground meant annihilation. Cavalry would run down the withdrawing infantry within hours. What Khalid did was a sequence of tactical maneuvers so precise that modern staff colleges still teach the pattern. First, he stabilized the line. He fought a holding action for the remainder of the day, personally leading countercharges to keep the Byzantines from exploiting the collapse. According to al-Waqidi, Khalid broke 9 swords in his own hand during that day's fighting, and only a Yemeni broadsword he had taken from a fallen enemy remained intact by nightfall. He would say later that the day at Mutta taught him what a sword truly was. Second, under cover of darkness, he completely reorganized the army. He took the rear guard and moved them to the front. He took the right wing and moved them to the left. He took the left wing and moved them to the right. He changed every unit banner. When the sun rose on the second day, the Byzantines looked across the plain and saw what appeared to be an entirely different army. The faces in the front rank were unfamiliar. The standards were unfamiliar. The dispositions were unfamiliar. Third, he sent a small force back toward the direction of Medina at first light, then had them reapproach with dust rising behind them, so that from the Byzantine perspective it looked as though reinforcements were arriving from the Hijaz. The Byzantines, who had assumed they were finishing off the same broken force from the previous day, now believed they were facing a fresh Muslim army. Theodore hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Khalid used the pause to execute a fighting withdrawal, a controlled, phased retreat where each unit covered the disengagement of the unit ahead of it. The Byzantines pursued, but cautiously, unsure whether they were being drawn into a trap. Over the next several days, Khalid brought the bulk of his force back across the desert to Medina. The casualty figures for Mutta are debated. Islamic sources give a Muslim death toll of only 12, a figure most modern historians consider implausibly low, and which likely reflects only the named companions killed. Realistic estimates suggest several hundred Muslim dead out of the 3,000 engaged. Whatever the exact number, the essential fact is this: an army that should have been destroyed to the last man walked out of a 5-to-1 engagement against the Byzantine Empire and returned home. When the survivors reached Medina, the people of the city met them on the road, throwing dust and shouting, "Cowards, you fled in the path of God." And the prophet stopped them. He said, "They are not the fleers. They are the returners if God wills." He said of Khalid, and this is the phrase that would define the next 15 years of Middle Eastern history, "Saif min Sayf Allah, a sword from among the swords of God." Saif Allah al-Maslo, the drawn sword of God. But the aftermath of Mutta reached far further than a battlefield title. Consider what Mutta actually was in the arc of history. In 629, the Byzantine Empire was the most powerful military force in the Mediterranean world. Heraclius had just rebuilt Roman prestige by destroying the Sassanid Persian army at Nineveh in 627. The Ghassanid frontier was garrisoned by veteran Limitan and reinforced regular thematic troops. A ragged expedition of 3,000 desert Arabs was, on paper, nothing. But Mutta revealed 2 things that would prove catastrophic for both Byzantium and Persia. First, it revealed that Muslim armies could fight the Byzantine field forces on their own frontier and survive. The psychological threshold, the belief that the imperial armies were untouchable, had been broken. Every subsequent Islamic commander who marched north knew that Khalid had already done it. Second, it revealed Khalid ibn al-Walid himself. Within 4 years, Khalid would command the Ridda Wars, subduing the tribal rebellions that erupted across Arabia after Muhammad's death in 632. In 633, he would march an army across the Nafa Desert, a route considered impossible, appearing before Damascus without warning. In 634, at the Battle of Ajnadain in Palestine, he would defeat a Byzantine army roughly 3 times his size. In August of 636, at the Battle of Yarmouk, he would annihilate the main Byzantine field army of Syria in a 6-day engagement that effectively ended Roman rule in the Levant forever. Within 7 years of Mutta, the Byzantine Empire had lost Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. Within a decade, the Sassanid Persian Empire had ceased to exist. Every one of those campaigns was commanded by the man who had picked up the banner on the second day at Mutta. Military historians point to something specific in Khalid's decision that day. 7th century Arab warfare was dominated by an ethos of personal courage: the poem, the duel, the martyrdom charge. Khalid violated that ethos. He treated a battle as a problem of force preservation, of deception, of maneuver over time. He was the first Arab commander to think in operational terms rather than heroic ones. Mutta is where that thinking began. Drop in the comments, was Khalid's withdrawal at Mutta the greatest tactical decision in early Islamic history, or was Yarmouk the true masterpiece? I want to know which battle you would defend. CTA 1213 Min. If you have made it this far, you already understand what most channels miss. The decisions that change history are not the loud ones. They are the quiet ones made in the hour after everything has gone wrong. If you want more of this, named commanders, real battlefields, the tactical detail behind the legend, subscribe and hit the bell icon. New battle every Wednesday. This channel exists because of viewers who want military history done properly, not slop, not summaries. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with me. Outro 1315 Min. The lesson of Mutta is not that 3,000 men held off 20,000. They did not, they lost their commanders and their line collapsed. The lesson is that a battle can be lost, and a war can still be won, if one person in the ruin has the discipline to stop counting glory and start counting survivors. Khalid ibn al-Walid understood, in the worst hour of his life, that saving 3,000 veterans meant Islam had 3,000 veterans for the campaigns of the 630s. Every one of them would fight at Yarmouk. Every one of them was infrastructure for an empire that had not yet been built. Zayd, Jafar, and Abdullah were buried in the field. A mosque now stands on the site. But the men who came home became the officer corps of the Arab conquests. If this one hit, if you want to see how Khalid used the lessons of Mutta on the largest scale imaginable, my video on the Battle of Yarmouk in 636 will blow your mind. 6 days on the Yarmouk River, the destruction of the entire Byzantine army of the East, and the single tactical decision Khalid made on the 4th day that ended Roman Syria forever. Watch that one next. In September 629 CE, 3,000 Muslims from Medina marched north to confront a Byzantine and Ghassanid coalition force at the village of Mutta in modern-day Jordan. Within the first hours of battle, all 3 commanders appointed by the Prophet Muhammad, Zayd ibn Haritha, Jafar ibn Abi Talib, and Abdullah ibn Rawaha, were killed. The army was on the edge of annihilation. What happened next transformed a battlefield disaster into one of the most studied withdrawals in military history, and gave Islam the commander who would, within 7 years, destroy the Byzantine army of the East and end Sassanid Persia. This is the full story of the Battle of Mutta, the diplomatic incident that provoked it, the impossible odds the Muslim expedition faced, the deaths of the 3 named commanders, the moment Khalid ibn al-Walid was handed the banner by acclamation, and the tactical deception he used to save the army. We trace the aftermath into the Ridda Wars, Ajnadain, Damascus, and Yarmouk. Chapters 00, 00 the Hook 00, 30 the Envoy and the Empire 03, 00 the Hour that killed 3 commanders 06, 00 the Night March and the Impossible Withdrawal 09, 00 the Sword that broke 2 empires 12, 00 subscribe 13, 00 the Legacy.